Good afternoon, everybody. Let's check for sound. How many people find the sound too loud, too soft, too distorted? Perfection. No such thing as perfection. Okay. I hope you enjoyed a wonderful lunch, and that means you'll all fall asleep during the session. And I'm going to encourage you, because I'm going to make the second half of the session experiential with actual hands-on meditation exercises. So those of you who do feel tired, you've prepared yourself exactly for this session. Please feel assured that the information will be subliminally transferred to your mind. Won't miss anything. This morning I spoke about mindfulness and habit formation, how we actually utilize unconsciously repetition of thought patterns and emotion patterns and then keep reproducing them rather lazily and uselessly. I want to begin this session by analyzing, however, what in fact mindfulness is, which I didn't this morning, and then move into a consideration of what meditation is vis-a-vis mindfulness and in its own right. So once again, if you've come to the wrong session, this is a good time to get up and leave. So once again, I consulted Professor Google to get my information, and he told me that mindfulness is this definition. Have a good read of it. And as I read it, I had some problems with it, although it sounded all-embracing and quite reasonable. My problems with that definition was something as follows. What's a mental state as opposed to an emotional state? What do we mean by focusing? What attribute is that? Is that what we're all worried about, ADD, ADHD, and the like? Or does focusing mean something quite else? Is awareness the same thing as consciousness? What do we mean by awareness? Is that not focusing in its own right? What about acknowledging and accepting? I don't accept. I don't think acceptance is a good approach. I think acknowledgement is very important. But I don't accept many things in life, and neither should you. You don't want to accept faults within oneself, even if the counselor says, you must accept the way you are. No, you should not. You should want to change. But to change, you have to acknowledge a given state. And then there's the issue of feelings and thoughts. Is there any distinction between them? If this were to be an interactive session, I would ask someone in the audience to tell me, what does emotion mean? So this will be therefore a rhetorical question to all of you, in a sense. What is emotion? And I hazard a guess that no one will be able to give me an answer, because I will actually challenge each definition. Most commonly people say it's a reaction, to which I ask, do you mean nuclear, electrostatic, or mechanical? Or they say it's a thought. Then I say, well, what's the difference between mind and emotion? Or they say it's something else, which is the product of the chemistry of the body. To which I ask, are you able to replicate it in a test tube then? And really, in the Western approaches, we don't have any clarity as to what emotion is. And that's why we have so much difficulty in assisting people with emotions. So I just put that out there for you, so you have a recognition that if you have difficulties in terms of understanding mind, emotions, which is not mind, so does everybody else. And then I looked at some of the contemporary research on how the mind operates. And the particular duality I want to adduce to you right now is a very interesting one. We have non-linear thinking, and we have central executive mode thinking. You know what non-linear thinking is? It's when you're lying on the beach without a care in the world, allowing your mind to roam. Others call this daydreaming. But science likes to give very technical terms like non-linear thinking. And we usually sort of say, well, that's not terribly important. Much more important is central executive mode thinking, which is highly focused. The interesting thing is that both are absolutely necessary. That in fact there's a very, very important role for non-linear thinking, the mind-wandering mode. We have discovered again by looking on screen, observing brains in operation, that when you are involved in mind-wandering mode, non-linear thinking, daydreaming, much more of your brain is active, if not almost the totality of your brain. Or if I were to put it in spiritual terms, the neshama is being provided with a vehicle which is total in order to allow it to get a peek into the world. Whereas when you are in focused thinking, concentrating, then you're using a very narrow band of your brain. Now, this is not a qualitative distinction. There's a role for both. Mind-wandering mode is creative, whereas the central executive mode is developmental, probably corresponding in Hasidus to Chochmah and Bina. Chochmah being the way that we draw from our subconscious into the conscious, and Bina being the way that we then process that thought in terms of analysis, leading to understanding. But both are necessary. And I find that in schools, and specifically, we discourage the mind-wandering mode. I would actually program it into the syllabus and allow people, children, to have opportunities to actually experiment. And meditation, forms of meditation, are very, very conducive to this. One of the exercises I set in a classroom setting when I'm invited into schools, I ask kids to develop and construct their bedroom from scratch in their mind, step by step, piece by piece, color by color, shape by shape. And that kind of creative activity often transfers over to the other activity of central mode, which is focusing techniques, because you must use both contemporaneously, to tell you the truth. So I'm just telling you right now that both modes of mind are used in context of both mindfulness and meditation, as I will demonstrate. So this really tells us what is the definition of central executive mode, and that we call this the Bina process leading to the Da'at process, but I don't want to dwell there. And what we see here is, as I said earlier, that in fact much more of the neshama operates in creative mode. In other words, there's actually much more effort brought into play to move something from, let's loosely call subconscious, into the conscious, than to develop the conscious as such. And of course, we're born with different attributes. Some people have a higher attribute in one and some in the other, but we all possess both. And of course, the ideal in life is to develop both. The key to be able to practice that lies in undoing habits, as I said this morning, and to be focused in keeping the main thing as the main thing. But I'm not going to repeat that from this morning's discussion, as I do want to move into meditation, because all mindfulness training is done through meditation. So let's talk about the word meditation primarily for this session. The term meditation became popularized in the 60s and 70s through the agency of some very enterprising gurus who made their way across from the East to the West and introduced to an audience of younger people who were experimenting with the mind and otherwise, to utilize ways of reaching what they call nirvana, higher states of consciousness and awareness and the like. And probably it's a very, very fine activity to be engaged in. The problem being, however, that much of the Eastern meditations had what we Jewish people would define as avodah zarah, idol worship elements. And therefore, most of the rabbis forbade the practice of meditation in those days, correctly so, because meditation had really become akin to Eastern meditation. And what's the problem with avodah zarah? So we would have to translate the term. Avodah zarah being strange worship as a direct translation. But it means that there are elements at the spiritual level which adversely touch the Jewish soul and taint it, creating problems for its operation as such. I'm not developing that. That's a spiritual teaching, and on some occasion perhaps we can develop it. Suffice it to say, therefore, we were told, don't meditate. Of course, the word meditation had always existed. And there were formats of Jewish meditation that had traditionally existed from times of yore. You just have to read Kaplan's book on Jewish meditation, and you'll find that we've always practiced it. I don't advocate, however, anyone carries out any of those modalities that he talks about. A, they're not useful for today, and B, you're not trained for it and can cause actual damage. However, the idea that we meditated always existed. But here I'm talking about contemporary meditation as such. So this was the case until the Lubavitcher Rebbe in 1979 broke with the ranks of the rabbis who forbade it and gave a public discourse where he actually said it's very necessary. He said it's very necessary for people in this day and age, and in a Yiddish worded sikha, he used the English words as the rationale to calm people's nerves, was the terminology he used. In the 70s, anticipating that the world was entering into a period of time where the unsettlement of the mind was going to become more and more profound, leading to stressors in our lifestyles, creating unfortunate products, whether those products were ones of anxiety, and God forbid moving into depression and clinical depression and the like. But he asked that therapists and others begin to employ modes of meditation which would be stripped of the avodah zarah elements and be used therapeutically in a non-spiritual, non-theological context as therapy. Because protection, as I said this morning, of the body is an absolute mitzvah, because the body is the medium through which the neshama, our spiritual energy, flows through. Therefore, it's a mitzvah to make sure that we're well and healthy. So at that point, a number of us began working with meditation and created a number of modalities, some of which caught on. In fact, in the secular world, likewise, that arose the therapeutic approach of meditation, not least amongst whom was Dr. Herbert Benson, who might be a name that some of you are familiar with, who actually took individuals, wired them up, measured what happens physiologically in certain states of meditation, and found that it was highly therapeutic and positive. And there's some of the things which I'm going to share with you experientially in this session as such. There are many ways to focus in meditation. All meditations, Eastern, Western, whatever you want, have a common denominator: focusing. But what you focus on, why you focus, and how you focus depends on the value system, the cultural mores, and the goals of that particular spiritual pathway. So this is where perhaps Jewish goals can come into play, why we meditate. There is no virtue in meditation in itself. I do not advocate that everyone goes out and meditates. The same way as I don't advocate that everyone goes out and practices any one diet, or anyone goes out and starts playing soccer. Everything depends on what you want to achieve, and meditation is one pathway towards a goal, but you must have a goal for it. So if the goal is, for example, stress management, that's a worthy goal, and you can employ meditative modalities in order to achieve that. So what do we focus on? There are several common modes of focus, as you see. Breath is a common one, which I'll explain to you shortly, why and how it relates in Judaism. Then there's body scanning techniques. Then there are autogenic training techniques of creating heaviness and warmth of the body. And then there are others that are based on visualizations and sound focusing, etc. And you'll find that some of you are able to utilize one better than the other because of the nature of your mind and emotions. So it's good sometimes to experiment to see which one actually works best for you. I find for myself, if I happen to wake up in the middle of the night, or if I find it difficult to go to sleep, I happen to use body scanning techniques very successfully, and I usually fall asleep within 2 or 3 minutes. That's, of course, after training. Everything requires practice, 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 as I said this morning. I'm going to lead you through a breath meditation. Why breath? The Hebrew word for breath is neshima, which of course is etymologically very closely related to the word neshama. And that's because breath is the foremost expressor of the soul. It's the innermost expressor. How you breathe provides us with a clue as to how your body is operating in terms of the neshama flowing through the guf. So if you were to go for the 100 meters dash, do you use meters or yards in this country? 100-meter dash, it's very, very likely that your body would be stressed. And that stress would find itself in a format of breathing. You would be panting, gasping, because the oxygenation of the blood has a very high demand. But nevertheless, the breathing reveals the state of the body. That's obvious. Whereas if you watch a baby after birth, relaxing, sleeping, what part of the body seems to be moving most? The belly, not the chest. Because it's not gasping for extra oxygen, it's also in a very relaxed state, and therefore it's breathing abdominally rather than breathing through the upper part of the respiratory system within the chest as such. So that's just an indicator how breathing differently reveals states of your body, but much more. What did I press? Okay, is it working again? Okay, we'll get one where the batteries are not beginning to fail. Everything that happens, the Baal Shem Tov says, is an instruction. Nothing happens accidentally. That means that each one of us has a certain amount of battery power. And we have to be able to utilize the battery power to its fullest while it's still there. The 120 years. Please make most of your life. Okay, that could have been one of the teachings then. Neshima, breath. But what we're doing actually is, by focusing on breath, we stop focusing on something else, whatever that something else is, because Hashem has gifted us with a wonderful present. That present is, you cannot think of two things at the same time. Have you noticed? You simply can't. You can only think of one thing at a time. You can oscillate very quickly between two different thoughts or more, but not two at the very same time. Therefore, if I get you focused on one thought, It can either displace or create that thought for you at that time. In another session, I will explain a methodology of being able to remove stressors by slipping a new slide, a new PowerPoint slide into your brain by having practiced 2 or 3 very, very powerful slides. Like I might ask a client, I'd like you to recall 1, 2, or 3 times in your life, moments in your life, when you felt ecstatically happy, most wonderful moments you've ever had, as a child, as an adult. And then I ask the individual to practice 2 minutes a day, 3 times a day, to remain with that image or those images until they have perfected drawing on that slide of consciousness at will. And then when the negative thoughts begin to assail them, which is a problem for many, they have trained on slipping in this other slide that they have practiced to displace the other thought. Now, of course, it doesn't stay forever, but the interesting thing is that when you can interrupt a repetitive negative thought pattern, what you're doing is undoing the neurotransmitting pathway in the brain that you've laid down with a negative pattern, and therefore giving yourself an opportunity to lay down a new pattern with a positive thought. That's just showing you a particular meditative training approach that can be utilized. But I want to use breath. Therefore, let me demonstrate it to you. Please put everything out of your hands. Put it on the floor. Don't worry, it'll stay there. I will not levitate it. Place your feet symmetrically on the ground next to each other. Your hands resting on your knees or thighs. Your back fairly straight without being too rigid. And your head well balanced on the shoulders. And gently close your eyes. And just become aware of the sounds filtering into the room. Background sounds that have been here all the time, and yet they hadn't registered. To the point that you can actually hear the movement of air from the air conditioning system. And just become aware of your own breath, gently breathing in and breathing out. And if you can, prefer to breathe in through your nose, gently breathing in and breathing out. And become aware of the difference in temperature of the air entering your nostrils compared to the temperature of the air leaving your nostrils. Cooler air entering, warmer air exiting. And just stay there for a few more breaths, just being aware of the temperature differential. And now take a deeper, slower breath in through your nose, and deeper and slower breath out. And with your next breaths in, direct your breath down to your abdomen. And the way to achieve that is when you breathe in, expand your tummy, expand your abdomen to collect the air. And then pull your tummy in, the abdomen in to expel the air. So take a slow, deep breath in, expanding your abdomen, collecting the air, and then pulling it in to force the air out, so that it seems like you're breathing through your abdomen and not through your lungs. Practice it a few times because it's counterintuitive. Slow, deep breath in, expanding the abdomen, contracting the abdomen. And now let's lend some rhythm to the breathing. We'll breathe in for a count of 3, hold for a count of 3, and breathe out for a count of 4. So take a slow, deep breath in, 2, 3, hold, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4. In, 2, 3, hold, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4. And just continue breathing abdominally, rhythmically, smoothly, gracefully, smooth transitions from in to out and from out to in. And in the background of your mind, just become aware how relaxed you have become in the space of a few short minutes. Something you can achieve under any circumstances as you choose. Once again, focus on the breath entering your nostrils and exiting, and the difference in temperature. Begin moving your fingers and your toes here in this lecture room. And when you feel ready, gently open your eyes, coming all the way back. That feels good. And it feels good because there's reasons for that. Let me show you on screen what you achieved. The result of Dr. Benson's research is what you're feeling. You decreased your heart rate, your respiratory rate, your muscle tension, oxygen consumption, metabolic rate, analytical thinking. You increased your skin resistance and your alpha wave brain activity. All those things are real and measurable. And that helps define a relaxed state. So when we say, I feel relaxed, to some degree, those particular features are operating physiologically. Why is it so good to be able to practice this? For a number of reasons. The first one is that it's not stress that's the enemy, it's cumulative stress. What do I mean? Each one of us is able to handle a certain level of stress. But it's when stress builds upon stress, builds upon stress, builds upon stress, that we quickly reach the threshold whereby our body starts to break down. Therefore, using a relaxation response mechanism, as we did just then, breaks the cycle and means that the build-up has to start again with far less likelihood of damage to your body. So it's a very useful thing to do. Secondly, it's a very important way of developing clear thinking and wise thinking. Because all too often, our decision-making process comes from a very, very incomplete base. It's when we are in a state of emotional excitement, negative or positive, that we make decisions and they become unwise decisions. And therefore, beginning from a base of relaxed state, it's more likely that your decision-making processes become that much more valuable. Okay, so that was one format of meditation. I'll give you a completely different format and goal of meditation, so that if this one was for the purpose of body protection and undoing stress, creating relaxation, creating a level playing field within, this one we're going to do now deals much more with actually patterning a life approach to all life's exigencies. Gratitude, which is a particular feature which can characterize every single activity of the day. And we Jewish people have had an affirmation which we say every morning, as you're well familiar with, the Modeh Ani, which many people still continue to say, rattle off, and it's just to assuage their guilt that they did what they were told to do once upon a time, and maybe they get some brownie points for it, without realizing that it's actually an extremely valuable meditative tool to assume a posture for the day. Because when you move from the subconsciousness of sleep to the consciousness of the waking moment, and what does sleep mean? Sleep means that there is a somewhat disintegration, disconnectedness of neshama from guf, soul from body, as the soul goes up for its own tutorial to become wiser once it re-enters the body upon awakening. Whatever that phenomenon is that I've just simplified, the reintegration process of neshama and guf and the first consciousness posture that you actually adopt lasts for the day. So that if you wake up in a state of fear, not wanting to face the day, feeling inadequate, it's very likely that that posture will characterize all your interpersonal relationships for the day in some shape or form. Whereas if you're able to wake up in the morning and adopt deliberately and consciously a positive posture, that too has the lasting effect for the day. So let's do a little meditative exercise which I'll guide you through the way that I teach the saying of Modeh Ani in the morning. And all I'm going to ask you to do is to follow my voice and internalize what I say. So once again, just move into a position of symmetry, feet on ground, hands resting on knees, thighs, back straight, head balanced. Gently close your eyes. And just become aware of your breath, gently breathing in and breathing out, as if you've just woken up, and become conscious of your breathing. Modeh Ani, I thank you. I acknowledge. I submit. Modeh Ani, I thank you, Hashem, for restoring my soul and body to live another day. Modeh Ani. I acknowledge that I possess a unique giftedness which I am able to offer to the world. Modeh Ani. I submit my will to your will, and whatever happens today, I recognize as purposeful and ultimately meaningful. Modeh Ani. I thank you, Hashem, for restoring me to this day so that my reincarnative lifetime can express the uniqueness you have implanted within me, my own soul. Modeh Ani. I acknowledge that should circumstances arise today which seem to test me and challenge me, I will treat them as opportunities to grow and learn. Modeh Ani. I will abnegate my ego, practicing humility, giving me a wider angle vista of the world so that I don't get in the way of my own vision, learning from the otherness of existence. Modeh Ani lefanecha. I thank you, Hashem, here in your presence, right in front of you. Melech Chai v'Kayam, you the King who animates all things of existence. Shehechezarta bi nishmasi, you have restored to me my own individuality, my uniqueness, my soul. B'chemla, you have done that as an act of compassion because I may not have deserved it. Rabbi emunasecha, great is your faith in me, and it's your faith in me that'll drive me to higher heights today. And spend a few moments internalizing your message of Modeh Ani so that it characterizes everything that will occur to you this day. Focus again on your breath, gently breathing in and breathing out. Move your fingers and your toes right here. And when you're ready, gently open your eyes, coming all the way back. Isn't that a better way to wake up in the morning? But it takes a bit of preparation. It means 5 minutes less of sleep. It also means, I suggest, that you don't want to have an alarm clock that jars you to wake up. If you can find some mechanisms that are much more gentle, which there are many in the marketplace, choose those. And then as you wake up, move straight into the Modeh Ani. You can do that while you're still lying down, or swing us to the side of your bed with your right hand over your left hand clasped, which is an imagery of chesed over gevurah, for those who understand, and practice the Modeh Ani. So what I'm trying to demonstrate is that there are many modalities to be utilized for specific goals. So if someone says to you, you must practice meditation, your question should be why? Because you must not necessarily practice unless you have a specific purpose for that. And I'm offering these purposes today. And there are others that we may utilize. But I've got the 3-minute warning sign, so the third meditation which I would have liked to do with you, which is the one that I mentioned earlier, or a variation of it, of how to reframe your interpretation of negativity, we're going to have to save so that I have something left over to offer to be invited back. Otherwise, I probably will have run out of my repertoire. Okay, so the point that I want to make here is that every one of us has the capacity to live more deeply. I call it vertical living as opposed to horizontal living. Horizontal living is to skim the surface of life, moving on and on, the new fad, the new fashion, the new thing, the new acquisition. And that way, no fulfillment can take place, because there's always more. You're never going to fill the wantingness. Wantingness goes on and on and on. But we have the capacity to live vertically, not horizontally. Let me give you this piece of imagery. If you were to visit me in Australia, I would probably advise you to go up to the most wonderful part of Australia in the north called the Barrier Reef, and to go scuba diving, or at least snorkeling. Now, what's the difference between swimming and scuba diving and snorkeling? Swimming is very, very pleasant, cool, buoyant, but you're on the surface of the water. If you go beneath the surface of the water up there, the imaginative beauty that you can witness is so breathtaking that it will make swimming on the surface of the water pale into insignificance. The same holds true for every moment of your life. You can swim on the surface of life and look for another and another and another. Or you can take every moment and explore it vertically. Swim beneath the surface. Get to know people more deeply. Get to know yourself more deeply. Get to recognize that those people that Hashem sends into your life are purposeful. That challenge that faces you is purposeful. And when you live that way more mindfully and deeply, life's fulfillment is that much more increased, exponentially so. And I strongly advocate you to do so. For those of you who would like to continue learning practical ways of using meditative techniques for health, undoing anger, learning to love more profoundly, undoing stress, and all the other things I have on my particular section called Spiritual Growth, I've conveniently put them onto one USB, which has all the 14 CDs, and that's available in the back over there. Feel free to have a look, and if you'd like, feel free to get one for yourself. Also, feel very free to be in touch with me. I'm going to give you my email address. Feel free to write it down. I also put out a weekly blog, and I'm happy to put you on that if you contact me. And my email address is spiritgrow, one word, at laiblwolf.com. And Laibl Wolf is spelled L-A-I-B-L-W-O-L-F. I thank you for giving me the pleasure of joining me today. I wish you a beautiful life and many mitzvahs. Thank you very much.